live stream.
Okay.
Good morning. This morning is Sunday, January 2nd, 2022. So welcome to all of you, those on Zoom in person and those on the recording down the road at some point in time. So we'll start with an opening reading. This reading is from Aaron Stockwell. In this new year, let us be amazed. Let us search for new life and hope in our midst. Let us nurture creativity in every form. Let us be reminded that new insights of the universe are always being made. In this new year, let us be amazed. All right, Bill, if you could play that tune, please, that'd be great. Thank you, Bill. We'll now move to our chalice lighting.
And today's chalice lighting is from Katie Gelfand. We call forth the life of our faith by igniting our chalice. This spark of New Year beginnings invites us to a sacred space to reflect where we have been and where we are going. For we know with brave hearts that from every ending of our lives, we are sent forth to make a new beginning.
And now we have announcements. So if you have an announcement, raise your hand so I can see it real well. Katie, are there any announcements from church?
Carrie.
Next Sunday, our speaker will be Ricky Cruz, and he will be doing the second in his mythology series about the Japanese mythology. And that'll be here at the church.
Thank you. Any other announcements from church?
No.
Okay, anything here from you folks on Zoom? If you have one, raise your hand, put your hand up close to the camera so I can see it. No? Okay, I have a few. First of all, this was in the newsletter, but Tom Kitchens, a longtime member of our church, passed recently. He passed, based on his obituaries, he passed on the 18th of December. His service was on the 21st at a Lutheran church. And yeah, I guess that if you want to know more about his life, his obituary is on the funeral home webpage. I think it was Kilgore's. It was in the newsletter, but if you want to read a little more about Tom, you can do that. Secondly, I mentioned this last week, but once again, if you go to church in person and then you find out you tested positive or you get COVID, please let a board member know, or a couple board members, so we can get in touch with the other folks who were there at church and let them know that they may have been exposed to COVID, and that we can help keep members safe and reduce the spread. So as far as our COVID numbers, Chuck Morgret has been tracking that for the board, shares it with us each week. The numbers are going up pretty rapidly here in our 7-county region. We're lagging behind the nation. I think the state, Tennessee, their numbers were, as of Thursday, the state was somewhere in the 90s, like 95 cases per 100,000 in the state. Well, our 7-county region is lagging a little bit behind that. As of last Wednesday, we were at 47, just a shade under 47 cases per 100,000. So what that means is we have a policy in place, the board developed for how we deal with COVID cases. Right now we're in a zone that's called the board's discretion. So we open the church under that for in-person and can close it at our discretion as well. But when we get to 100 cases per 100,000, that's when our policy states will go back to online only, stop the hybrid, stop the in-person services. So the way the numbers are going, we're going to get to that 100 case load pretty soon. Don't know when. We do have a special board meeting we're going to hold after service to discuss this. So more to come on that. So any other announcements?
I do have another one.
Yes, Carrie.
Since people enjoyed so much the talk that Brig gave, where she talked about the 4 agreements, and our Talkback people were interested in it, I thought I'd offer a 6-week workshop on the 4 agreements, and that would be on Zoom. So just let me know, Carrie Hawk, if you're interested.
When will that start?
Whenever people decide, it'll be a couple weeks.
Okay.
And it would be on Wednesday night.
Okay.
To avoid conflicting with the other Zoom meetings on Tuesday and Thursday.
All right. Thank you, Carrie, for that. That sounds good. So Tom has his hand up, and then Rick Phelps. So Tom, go ahead.
Okay, real quick, I just learned that while COVID, the new Omicron version is going down in terms of effect of the vaccines, if you get a booster, it'll multiply your response by about a factor of 10. So everybody is ready for a booster and can get it, go get it.
Thank you. That's very, very good advice. Yeah, that's what it sounds like with what I'm reading with Omicron is the booster is what you need to stay out of the hospital. Yeah, absolutely.
Big difference.
Yep. Okay, Rick Phelps.
Yeah, just to repeat our Thursday evening get together at 7 p.m. We will be Zooming this coming Thursday. We are selecting TED Talk still, may do something else in the new year, but everyone is welcome. We're easy to find. 7 p.m. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Rick. Other announcements? I'm going to make one more announcement, and that is, about the financial support of the church. If you wish to donate, support the financially to help the church, you can send a check to P.O. Box 331 in Tullahoma, 37388. That's our mailing address for the church. So if you would like to support the church, that's a way to do it. Any other announcements? All right, next is our responsive reading.
Okay.
This is by that prolific author, Anonymous or Anonymous. As we begin this new year, remember, life is too short to wake up in the morning with regrets.
So, love the people who treat you right.
And forget about the ones who don't.
And believe that everything happens for a reason.
And if you get a chance, take it.
And if it changes your life, let it.
Nobody said that it would be easy.
They just promised that it would be worth it.
So now we move on to our speaker, who is Cassandra Zarnisky. So we're going to switch seats. and she will be with you shortly.
Okay, my title today is So What's New in the World? I felt called to write just a personal paragraph here as we begin. Yesterday we began the new year of 2022, and if it follows the experience of the last 2 years, this year promises to bring us uncommon and even unprecedented events to deal with. When I complain or blame others for the world's unpredictability, I find nowadays such judgment comments are pointless. So I've begun to try to understand life's meaning in a very different way from how I was taught as a child. The recent death of our son Adrian brings what I have to say today into sharp focus. And I ask that all of we people at UU Tullahoma take care of one another and stay grounded in 2022. So I begin my talk. Jean, are you ready? Our UU friend, Jean Jones, had a delightful conversation with us a while back with his talk titled, What Surprises Us Surprises Him. Jean remarked several times during the talk, what am I thinking these days? And those words made me ponder about what I am thinking these days. I haven't yet acquired the ability to see life with humor, like Jean does, and living life as an adventure, like Jean does. But I am giving a talk today, like Jean did, with the optimistic hope of speaking of things that might be of value to us this new year. Then, around the same time, I got another nudge. Some UU friends suggested that I share ideas with the congregation about a book that I'm currently rereading and talking to lots of friends about. That provided the opening for my talk today about what I'm thinking, and so off I go here. My first quote today comes from a fictional old sage, and it pretty much sums up where I find myself today. Frodo said, I wish it had not happened in my time. So do I, said Gandalf, and so do all who live to see such times. But that is not for them to decide. All we have to decide is what to do with the time that is given us. I'm glad COVID waited to appear until my 7th decade of life. At least I have a lot of living, reading, and research under my belt to cope better with today's fast-altering world. My perspective has changed, and I find myself taking a radical hairpin turn since the new boogeyman, COVID-19, swaggered into town. And although I will use several quotes about the book I'm talking about, please don't think that this talk is a book report. This book, though, is a good jumping off spot to lead into what I'm thinking about these days. I bought a book in 2006 from an author that I had read before and liked. His second book, however, was a problem for me. I didn't get it. From the very first chapter, I didn't get it. Thus, it became the only book that I've ever stuck on a shelf for more than a year because I couldn't understand or incorporate the message into my life. And when I did, pick up the volume again and got the message in 2007, all kinds of things began to explode in my awareness. The book I speak of is titled A New Earth, Awakening to Your Life's Purpose, written by Eckhart Tolle. The book has been received enthusiastically worldwide for years, and that's an understatement. Early on, the New York Times described the author as the most popular spiritual author in the United States. A nutshell summary of The New Earth goes something like this. This book is a profoundly spiritual manifesto for a better way of life and for building a better world. So, fast forward to January 2020. Nothing for me since January 2020 has felt like business as usual since COVID-19 burst onto the scene. In those early days, in trying to make sense of what was happening, Eckhart Tolle's old book practically jumped off my bookshelf, insisting that I read it again. So since it's fun to read words from enlightened people, I once again picked up and began to read A New Earth. Again, Tolle took me to strange places that helped me with life's big questions. The first thing I reread when I pulled A New Earth off the shelf in 2020 was his description of how Tolle became illuminated in his understanding of our world. Many say Eckhart Tolle achieved enlightenment then with the chaos that he saw around himself 30 years ago. Here's how Tolle recalls his epiphany. Tolle said, "I couldn't live with myself any longer, and in this, a question arose without an answer. Who is the I that cannot live with the self? What is the self? I felt drawn into a void. I didn't know at the time that what really happened was that the mind-made self, with its heaviness, its problems, that lives between the unsatisfying past and the fearful future, collapsed. It dissolved. The next morning, I woke up, and everything was so peaceful. The peace was there because there was no self, just a sense of presence with others or beingness, more like observing and watching." End quote. In 2016, A New Earth was reprinted on its 10th anniversary, and I bought the reprint wondering if there was any new material included. Though the text of the book is unchanged, there is an added preface by the author that talks about the two Americas that we now find ourselves in. An America that understands that all of us sink or swim together, but is confident that there is a better future. And then there's a second America that lives in fear, prefers lies to truth, and uses violence to get its way. Here's a bit of what Eckhart Tolle's new preface in his reprinted book added. Quote, "This book's purpose is not to add new information or beliefs to your mind, or try to convince you of anything, but to bring about a shift in your consciousness. There are many positive things occurring that are not considered newsworthy, but they are in fact of much greater significance. And they started to arise a long time ago. In many parts of the world, there is an emerging sense of social justice that our ancestors could not have dreamed of." End quote. That made me think of the young woman from Sweetener, Switzerland, who promotes the idea of making this world a cleaner place to live. And as a side note, I'll return to that started to rise long ago statement pretty soon. Eckhart Tolle has a take on humanity. that says that most of us live in a mad world. Besides that statement making me smile, Tolley also did elaborate on his conclusion. Like he said, we in the West are the most mind-dominated of all cultures, and how spiritual you are has nothing to do with what you believe, but it has everything to do with your state of consciousness. Another quote that continues along the same line says, "To recognize one's own insanity, of course, is the arising of sanity, the beginning of healing and transcendence, because the primary cause of unhappiness is never the situation, but instead it's your thoughts about it." Tolley also says that words reduce reality to something that the human mind can grasp, which isn't very much. When you don't cover up the world with words and labels, a sense of the miraculous returns to your life that was lost a long time ago, when humanity, instead of using thought, became possessed by thought. Eckhart also advises us that sometimes letting things go is an act of far greater power than defending or hanging on. Anything that you resent and strongly react to in another is also in you. And he says, acknowledging the good that you already have in your life is the foundation for abundance. My final quote of Tolley says this: "Don't seek happiness. If you seek it, you won't find it, because seeking is the antithesis of happiness. Life is the dancer, and you are the dance." So, there you have it. That's Eckhart Tolle. So, I go on now to what I'm thinking these days. I have always had a thought that our generation of post-World War II infants and baby boomers have sensed all of our lives that our world is desperate for radical change. I think our generation is ending the old rubric of power, greed, and survival of the fittest. Maybe positive change in human nature is in motion, and it will not be stopped, because I think there's a moment in any system where the effect of the old can no longer be retrieved. The new order will complete itself, and I think we're at that crossover. I feel for myself that puzzle pieces are finally beginning to fall into place. It's my impression that we are participants in a complete reset of the human race, from one of competition to cooperation. Oh, back to the statement of regarding a long time ago. Recently, I read a comment from Maya Angelou, who died in 2014. Maya Angelou was a Black 20th century writer and a civil rights activist, and she spoke about the two Americas we're living in right now. And here's Maya Angelou's comment, quote, "This is a time for us to be courageous, to stand up for what is right across all society and government. This is a time not unlike things that humans faced in the time of slavery, having to stand up for what is right across the nation. So stand in faith, stand up, have courage, and push for what is right, because in the end, right will win out for humankind." So when I heard that clarion call about courage in the face of the two opposing Americas, it brought to mind Colonel Chamberlain's speech at the Battle of Gettysburg in 1863. Here's what Joshua Chamberlain said to 120 Union deserters who had just been placed in his charge. And we pause for just a moment here.
So yeah, we're gonna go to screen share for Joshua Chambers. Let's see, is that right? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Here's the situation. The whole Reb Army is up that road a ways waiting for us, so this is no time for an argument like this. I tell you, we could surely use you fellas. We're now well below half strength. Whether you fight or not, that's up to you. Whether you come along is well, you're coming. You know who we are, what we're doing here, but if you're going to fight alongside us, there's a few things I want you to know. This regiment was formed last summer in Maine. There were 1,000 of us then. There are less than 300 of us now. All of us volunteered to fight for the Union, just as you did. Some came mainly because we were bored at home. Thought this looked like it might be fun. Some came because we were ashamed and not. Many of us came because it was the right thing to do. All of us have seen men die. This is a different kind of army. If you look back through history, you will see men fighting for pay, for women, for some other kind of loot. They fight for land, power. Because a king leads them, or just because they like killing. But we are here for something new. This has not happened much in the history of the world. We are an army out to set other men free. America should be free ground. All of it. Not divided by a line between slave state and free. All the way. From here to the Pacific Ocean. No man has to bow. No man born to royalty. Here we judge you by what you do, not by who your father was. Here you can be something. Here is the place to build a home. But it's not the land. There's always more land. It's the idea that we all have value. You and me. What we're fighting for, in the end, fighting for each other. Sorry, I didn't mean to preach. You go ahead. You talk for a while. If you choose to join us, want your muskets back, you can have them. Nothing more will be said by anybody anywhere. If you choose not to join us, well, you can come along under guard, and when this is all over, I will do what I can to see you get a fair treatment, but for now, we're moving on. Gentlemen, I think if we lose this fight, we lose the war. So if you choose to join us, I'll be personally very grateful.
Those were indeed inspiring words. That reenactment comes from the film Gettysburg. And of note, that those 120 POWs who heard what he said, all except 6 of the deserters, 114 men, chose to fight with the 2nd Maine Unit at Gettysburg. Colonel Chamberlain recognized the reason for the American Civil War that was unique in the history of warfare: to allow all people to be free and to stand up for each other. The price of freedom was a cost of 750,000 American lives. But emerging social justice had started to rise a long time ago. I think that you and I are opening the door of something that is hard for our everyday minds to grasp. But hearing Chamberlain's dream of a better world did show an arising sense of social justice in the 1860s, because there was a growing awareness of moving to a higher consciousness level. Can we know that there's a bright future ahead? Author Jeremy Lent used to be a successful IT entrepreneur, made a fortune, but he changed careers following his epiphany. Today, Jeremy Lent is described as a leading edge voice for change. And Mr. Lent has this to say about our future. Quote, "It's a bold idea to transform the very basis of our civilization to one that is life-affirming. But when the alternative is unthinkable, a vision of a flourishing future shines a light of hope that can become a self-fulfilling reality. Dare to imagine it. Dare to make it possible by the actions that you take, both individually and collectively. And it might just happen sooner than you think." End quote. So, how have I begun creating a life-affirming future? A very dear intellectual friend of mine who occasionally gets these loudspeaker-sized messages from out there somewhere awakened one morning recently to hear, "Perception determines your experience," it announced. And it repeated the exact same words to her throughout the whole morning, as she smilingly recalled. Perception determines your experience. They're simple words, perhaps, but I was gobsmacked by